The Her Sports Show, live every Wednesday on YouTube and every podcast app.
Hello and welcome to the Her Sports Show, our weekly series bringing you the latest and breaking news in women's sport. In this week's episode, we discuss the fantastic racing from the National Athletics Championships last weekend, Ireland's 9-0 victory over Georgia in the World Cup qualifiers, the LGFA quarterfinals booked, and the Women's Irish Open returning after 10 years. This week, we're joined by sports journalist Ger McCarthy to go through the news stories and all the sporting action. We're joined by Ger McCarthy again. Ger, it's great to have you on the show.
Thanks very much for having me back. I didn't make too much of a aims of it last time out, so I must have done something right. Thank you. It's good to be back.
I thought we had discussed some good things, and there were some really good competitions and matches and that over the last couple of days. So I guess first things first, in terms of the soccer, we had a 9-0 win to Ireland over Georgia. And I know when we were talking about it last week, we were kind of wondering like what was the scoreline going to be. Obviously talking about the fact that Ireland were playing away to Georgia. And you know, we had an 11-0 match in Ireland in front of a home crowd. Did you expect the score to be 9-0, or was that a surprise for you?
I did expect the score to be close enough to the previous one, simply because, with the greatest of respect to Georgia, they've conceded nearly 50 goals. They've conceded 50 goals in their group now. They are the Women's World Cup qualifying group were at the stage where FIFA were, where they started to seed teams and put them into their own particular groups to play teams of similar ability and similar talent. I don't know what Georgia get out of games like this. They're obviously representing their country. It's very important for them, and I acknowledge that. But from an Irish point of view, what really impressed me, I suppose, was the patience of the team, Niamh, because it didn't start out too well. The heat, it's very hard to put across on TV just how hot and humid it was there. But what was even more impressive from Vera Paul and her management team in the FAI, and let's give them some credit, they've taken up flack. The camp that they had pre this match, where they played the Philippines in a friendly in hot and humid conditions, definitely stood to the players. And you know, you're an international footballer. It's not nice hammering teams 11-0 and 9-0, but you got to do a job. Go in, get the job done, because the real work starts in September with respect to Georgia. Again, I was impressed with the professionalism of the Irish approach. I was impressed with the patience. That's the thing, because on nights like that, when it's not necessarily going your way at the start and you know you're going to win, and you can get angsty. And remember as well, Niamh, all these players now are out of season, like their seasons have finished. So to put in the performance that they did, to score 9 goals, to keep a clean sheet and no injuries, I think as a manager, I think Vera Paul will be delighted with that, with a view to looking ahead to later in the year.
Yeah, no, it certainly was an incredible result. And as you said, you know, it's hard for Georgia to be on the receiving end. But in terms of getting that result, you know, Ireland are trying to make sure that they're giving themselves every opportunity to qualify for the World Cup. Obviously, we're aiming for a second place finish in the group. It's looking like it's between themselves and Finland, and they want to make sure that they progress out of the group into those playoff stages to try and qualify. Finland will be the game in September, and it'll be in front of a home crowd. How much of an impact do you think that'll have?
Oh, huge. I think these are good, positive times for international football, for women's international football in Ireland. And I think in previous home matches, I mean, look at the Swedish game and the performance and the way the crowd got behind the team then, and that Sweden are already qualified. But one thing, there's a huge amount of positivity, and it's good. And there's an awful lot of feel-good factor around the Irish international soccer team at the moment, which is even better.
Yeah.
But there's 2 huge matches in September, not just Finland, but Slovakia immediately afterwards. Now, if Ireland beat Finland, they reach the playoffs. They don't qualify. And I've been kind of, not intentionally, but correcting a lot of people on social media this week, going, look, it's fantastic, it's brilliant, but we're still only in the playoffs.
The job's not done yet. Yeah. No, there's a good few matches to go through in the playoff stages as well. This
is it. But I think Vera Paul now has a real hold on the team. She knows her best 11. It's taken a bit of time with respect to her, and I think international managers need that, but they don't get a lot of time. But she's got that settled team now. She's got a formation. The set pieces the last night as well, something against Georgia, were very impressive. I mean, the ability for Ireland to like Katie McCabe, especially, apart from her goals, but her delivery into the box, that's going to be huge against Finland. So it's very simple. Beat Finland, we're into the playoff. That renders the Slovakia game much less important. But if we don't beat Finland, it's not the end of the world. We have an opportunity after that. The good news is, I suppose, from an Irish point of view, it will be in season. players will be in the middle of their domestic club seasons. Hopefully there won't be any injury concerns. But right now, all Ireland could do against Georgia at this point of the qualification process was give themselves a chance to reach the playoffs, and they've done that. And it's not that long ago, Irish international female footballers were having to swap tracksuits and change in airports, and I've never forgotten that. It's not that long ago. So where we've gone, from where we've been to where we are off the field, is hugely important. The feel-good factor, the sponsorship from Sky, it's all moving in the right direction. Let's just hope I think we will have a full house against Finland. It's going to be fantastic. And a win. What a victory would do for Irish international women's football in this country, Niamh. And qualification, it's still a bit off, but qualifying for a major tournament would put this sport up there with women's international rugby, women's international hockey, because look at the bounce they've gotten from being at Olympics, from being at international championships. The same will happen with Vera Pauw in this senior panel, but they got to get there first. But I think we're in very, very good shape heading into September.
Yeah, no, certainly there is a lot of excitement when it comes to the team at the moment. And as you said, I think the sponsorship is, helping shed light on the team. The fact that there's momentum in their playing and their results at the moment is huge. So it's an exciting time. But as you said, there is a bit of a way for the qualification to actually happen, because obviously Sweden have, sealed the deal in terms of finishing top of the group. So it's just about getting into the playoffs. Ensuring that Ireland are the team to get there out of their group, and then getting through those stages to try and get into the World Cup. So it'd be amazing for them. I know they are disappointed, that they obviously didn't qualify for the Euros, and they're looking at like a couple of other teams that are there and feeling that they, probably are better outfits. But it's really exciting. In terms of the game against Georgia, were there any particular players that stood out for you?
McCabe. I mean, it goes without saying.
Okay, anyone other than Katie McCabe. Okay, you go to the matches and all you hear is Katie. Like,
it wasn't necessarily just her goals, and scoring a hat trick in an international game is never an easy thing to do. But we've come to expect it from her, and I wanted to mention her because you talk about the Irish team, everybody just goes, Katie's going to have a good game. Katie's going to play well. She's going to lead from the front. But
I feel like she's the Roy Keane of the women's team at the moment. Like,
I don't know how she'd react to that now, Niamh. That's an interesting statement that I'm going to let you with that one.
Okay, in terms of the stardom,
yes, absolutely.
She has so many people are going just to watch her, and she's playing so well and she's delivering all the time. And I think people forget as well, she's 25, 26, she's really not that old. And she's the household name of Irish women's football.
Yeah, and I was only poking fun at the fact that Roy was booed at Croke Park this past weekend. The big stage. I don't think Katie has any issues. We'll never have to worry about that. You're right. We have expectation levels of this team now, which is good. We have high expectation levels of Vera Pauw in this team, and McCabe leads from the front. She leads. She's a natural leader and a captain. And not only did she score the 3 goals, the reason I'm mentioning her is her all-round play. As you said, you could hear her. It worked great. Effort all the way right to the end. Didn't let up. That's what you want, because that's the effort and the commitment we're going to need against Finland. So if you're not doing it against Georgia, how are you going to do it against Finland? And she leads. And I think she is. I think the analogy with Roy Keane, the captain, is a good one, because, you look to your captain for inspiration, and who better than Katie McCabe? Word 2 for Louise Quinn. Took her goal as well. And, it's good to see her scoring again. And I'm a big fan of Denise O'Sullivan, not just because it's a Cork thing, but I think she's just a fantastic player. And she scored some amazing goals over in America already this year. I think she's going to have a big say in that Finnish game when it comes around again. I think McCabe will be closely marked, and I think Finland will be looking to a player mark her on the actual night itself. And I think the likes of O'Sullivan, the likes of Quinn will shine because of that. There'll be a little bit more space, and it's just good to see. It's hard to pick out a player, which is a good thing after a 9-0 drubbing, because everyone did their job. And look, if you do your job, if you can do it against Georgia away from home in those kind of humid conditions, it's a really positive sign when you'll need to do it in front of a big crowd, when they'll need to be patient against Finland come September, because it ain't going to be 9-0. But 1-0 will do. So I'm really pleased for Vera Pauw. I'm a big fan of Vera Pauw's, and I think I can see what she's trying to do now. I can see the formation. I can see the players slotting into it. She's more comfortable in the job now, and I think the players as a result are more comfortable. And you saw it in the performance. Even if it was 1-0 would have done me against Georgia. Even if they played badly, just get the win, get in, get out, do the job. They've done that with a bit of style and a growing confidence, and not an arrogance, but a growing confidence within that pool of players. And at the tip of it is our captain, Katie McCabe, and what a player she is.
Yeah, and I think the three players that you mentioned there they're solid players, and I think they will bring a bit of comfort into maybe some of the younger athletes, and in terms of like fluidity between the team and everything. So they're certainly building a really good work ethic together and kind of seamlessness that we're starting to see. So hopefully that continues as we progress against Finland and against Slovakia. What do you think World Cup qualification would mean for women's football in Ireland?
Oh, that's a tough one. I think obviously the positivity straight away, there'd be a surge of interest. There has been a lot of interest because the Irish team has started to put a lot of good results and performances together. I think the television exposure has just helped them so much. The sponsorship that we mentioned from Sky, I think, was important. But
I think it's like at the same time, like, yes, I completely agree. But like, we're not filling Tala at the moment.
No, and I think we need to get to a championships and do well at a championships, Niamh. That's the key. Like, we can't go to a championship, lose the 3 games because you lose the momentum. And I'm reminded of the hockey team. I keep going back to the international hockey team and what they've done at World Cups and at Olympics when they've been there. The viewing figures shot up, and young girls want to see the stars of the sport that they play, especially very young girls. And with soccer, I think the same would happen. I think the media side of it would go through the roof because you've got tailor-made stars ready to talk to the media. You've got McCabe, you've got O'Sullivan, you've got all those players in that Irish team. I don't want to list them all off. And what it would also do is it would establish the players within the actual setup at the moment, and the young players coming through. Look at the young Larkin from Shelbourne, 17 years of age, coming on and scoring the last day. Those are the next generation of players. They're the players that are actually after 2023 are the ones we're going to be looking to get us to the next European Championships. So the momentum is there. But if we were to get to a championships, if we were to play and get out of a group and play a knockout match, or even go a little bit further, I think this country, not male and female football supporters, would buy in and would get behind them. And all of a sudden, it wouldn't just be the mums and the dads bringing their daughters to the international matches, which is the way it is in other female sports. That's just the reality of it. Majority of fans that go to international rugby and that go to hockey and go to cricket, that's the way it is. What you want are the additional fans to buy in. You want the actual football supporters that go to men's matches to come to the women's too, to see McCabe in action, to see O'Sullivan, to see the next generation. That's what doing well at an international championships would do. And I think, I don't believe it just yet, but I think we're very close. But we've got to get the job done first in September, and then we'll talk about it. But it's a good question because I think you'd see more sponsorship, you'd see more interest, you'd see more column inches, you'd see us talking about it a lot more on top of all the things that you're already talking about. It could only be good. And what also happens then, final point, the knock-on effect is people start taking interest in the international underage teams.
Yeah.
What are the 19s doing? What are the youth teams? Who are the next players coming through? And all of a sudden, it's mainstream. It's natural. And that's what we want.
Yeah, no, I think, like, honestly, I think it would be huge if we managed to get that far. And I think every game that we're playing successfully, is gaining more and more momentum. Like, if you think back as far as the game against Australia last year, that was something, or maybe it was the year before at this stage. The time is out of my head at this stage. But yeah, I think that game was, from there as far as now, there's more and more interest in the team, in the journey. And people are seeing that there's a real possibility of qualification. And I think if we did manage to qualify, Ireland, I think typically as a nation, like to get behind their own. I don't think they mind kind of who or what it is. So I think if that does happen, that we'll see people buy into it, they'll really support it, and you will unearth more and more soccer fans to really, really get behind them. And I think that could just be huge in terms of the effect that it'll have across the support for the team. People getting down and actually watching the games, and then across the nation, I think we'd see changes in terms of like more people playing, maybe some of the women's football teams around the country being taken a bit more seriously, from grassroots level right the way up. So I think it could be huge. Over onto Irish athletics, it was the national championships at the weekend, and it was certainly a star-studded affair. The first win of the weekend was with Sarah Lavin in the 100-meter hurdles, making this her 7th national title. The Limerick Olympian is a hard worker, and she certainly doesn't take anything for granted. So stay tuned to hear her post-race interview. Both the 100 meters and the 400 meters did not disappoint. I know you were looking forward to those, Ger. They were very exciting. The 400 meters was up first with Sophie Becker and Phil Healy going head to head. So what did you make of this race?
Well, I have to take West Cork jersey off for a second and call it down the middle. Obviously, I was disappointed not to see Phil win, but what a performance from the two of them. One of the key factors of that weekend of the Athletics Championships, as you know, Niamh, was the wind. It was incredibly windy, and so there wasn't really going to be any earth-shattering qualification times, which was disappointing. But in replacement of that, we had some of the cream of Irish athletics talent involved, and the 400 meters between Sophie and Phil. I mean, Sophie Becker went out so hard in the first 250 meters, and she basically laid down a marker, and she had to, I think, with Phil next to her. But the finish was very, very close. But I think in terms of confidence boosting for Sophie Becker, I think it's huge, and I think it was a really good win for her. Phil is still, working her way through and getting ready for the rest of the season. I think she'd be obviously disappointed that she didn't win, but I think there's another couple of seconds in her in that time, and consider you can't really take too much notice of the actual time because of the win factor. But when you've two athletes of these two individuals and the combined talent that they have going head to head, this is what we want to see. This is what garners interest and generates viewership and increases the interest in athletics in general. And I thought Phil Healy was going to win it, but Sophie Becker put in a fantastic performance, and she's been building slowly all year as well. In fairness to Sophie as well, her times have been really consistent. So yeah, fantastic race and nothing in it at the end.
Sophie is running really well, and like she did say that's her race strategy all the time, is like get out hard. And I know when the race is ongoing, people are kind of going, oh, it's 250 meters, it's 300, like is she going to blow up in the last 100? But like she maintained it and she held off Phil, who traditionally does have a strong finish. So look, I think Phil is there's loads more to come from her this season, and I feel like she's kind of warming up. She's like easy into it. I feel like there's a lot more to come. Like she's certainly it'll be exciting to watch the two of them over the next couple of weeks, racing each other, but also racing internationally and seeing what they can do, because they're very fast at the moment. In terms of sprinting, obviously moving on to the 100 meters, we had Rashida Adelecki, Molly Scott, Joan Healy. We were talking about this last week, and it was something that you were excited to watch.
Yes, and boy, did it live up to its billing. What a race. I mean, again, considering the headwind, there was no tailwind, so it was going to be a kind of a difficult.
Yeah, you were saying that you were looking for a record from Rashida in that 100 meters so that she could have a clean sweep from 60 to 400, but unfortunately the weather went against her in this scenario.
It did, and it was disappointing because I think that would have been another headline that would have grabbed attention. But in fairness to her, first of all, Molly Scott, what a start! It's unbelievable. Her starts are probably the best of the top three, and probably of the best Irish sprinters out there at the moment. She got off like a train, and what I noticed as well was I interviewed Joan Healy earlier this week, and she said she was glad she was in the lane she was in, because she didn't want to see Molly starting and going off so fast. She knew it was coming. But let's give some credit to Rashida, because she admitted afterwards her start wasn't great. She admitted afterwards that her preparations weren't necessarily what she would have liked, but a champion doesn't make excuses. They get the head down, and she fought back. And what the really important thing was the dip right at the end, because there was only 1/100th of a second in it. So fantastic for Rashida to win it, and important for her because it was the only race she was running in. Very encouraging for Molly Scott. Really encouraging. And if there's another percentile there of improvement, she's going to win some big races this year. And even more impressive was Joan Healy, who had a fantastic start and a strong middle section of it. And working with Derval O'Rourke and working with Marion Heffernan is clearly having a positive effect. So what a time to have three outstanding 100-meter Irish sprinters at the one time. It was a fantastic race considering the conditions, but I think the Rashida winning has thrown the gauntlet down to everyone else now, like that, we're going to have to find some bit of percentile somewhere. But in Molly Scott and Joan Healy, she's going to be pushed all the way anytime she races them. And isn't it brilliant?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Molly and Rashida are just pushing each other on and on in those sprint distances. And I have to say, I was a little disappointed. I did think Molly had won. I was a little disappointed for her because she had just such a great race. And I think probably there's a bit of expectation there that from everybody and across multiple distances that any race Rashida goes out that she's going to win. And obviously there's a lot of people competing across, the 100, 200, 400, 60 meters, whatever it is. And it's great that she's such a talent, but I just think Molly she just was so close that I was a little bit heartbroken for her, but it's so exciting to watch the two of them. We did catch up with Emmet Dunlevy, who coaches some of these incredible athletes, including Maisie O'Sullivan, who finished second in the 1500 meters. So we will head over to that interview now and see what he had to say, ranging from the sprint distances to middle distances, and get his expert opinion. And it's great to have you on the Her Sport Show, and congratulations on your success at the National Championships.
Thanks very much. Great to be here.
So who stood out for you over the weekend?
So I guess when we look at all the events, I mean, I predominantly deal with distance runners, but the sprinters definitely took a lot of the limelight on the weekend. Probably the star of the future in Irish athletics that we got to see in action on Sunday was Rashida Adeleke in the 100 meters. So, I mean, she's been phenomenal over the last 2 years since she moved to the States. Particularly this season, she's had a real breakthrough year. And it was great to see her in action against the best of the Irish sprinters on Sunday. And while the conditions of the weekend impacted the events to some extent, there was a very strong headwind in the home straight. So the times weren't particularly quick. What we did get was some brilliant racing, and that women's 100 meters was fantastic. Molly Scott got out really quickly, had a huge lead built up at sort of 50, 60 meters, and then Rashida gradually started pulling her back and probably only got to the lead with about 2 meters to go, ended up winning it by 100th of a second. So that was, I think for most people, probably the highlight of the weekend.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, a lot of people talk about Rashida, and a lot of people were very excited to watch her race. And like, I had interviewed Molly a couple of weeks ago, and we're keeping an eye on what kind of form she's in as well. So she wouldn't have surprised some people. But she's pushing Rashida all the way. Like, the two of them, the 60-meter record was exchanged hands in the last couple of months as well. So Molly's certainly not one to be written off.
No, absolutely not. And probably it's interesting that I think when you look at their trajectory of their careers, Molly is very much 60 meters, 100 meters. She's very powerful out of the blocks, really quick over that first 40 or 50 meters. Whereas Rashida is obviously, she's very tall, takes her a while to get into her stride, and ultimately she's probably going to be a 200, 400 meter athlete. So that 100 meters is kind of a happy medium for both. It's probably the fairest distance for both of them to race off against at the moment. But when you look at Molly, I mean, her indoor season was fantastic. She had a really strong season. They traded that 60 meter record, as you say. So there's a little bit of a rivalry developing there, and I think over 60 and 100 over the next couple of years, that's something we're going to see develop a little bit more.
Yeah, no, they know each other very well. Obviously, they've been racing each other for a couple of years, so I think they're probably enjoying the competition and to be, pushing the boundaries together. Like, all they want to do is be as fast as they possibly can on the international stage. In terms of kind of Rashida's journey, like, there's a couple of people asking, like, should she be moving up to that 200, 400? Like, obviously, she's traditionally raced 100 and 200, and she's raced a handful of 400s. If she moves up to the 400, then obviously she's going against Sophie Becker, Phil Healy. With the height of Rashida, is that potentially the better option for her?
Yeah, I mean, in a general sense, athletes who are taller take a little bit longer to get into their stride. So you would generally say that athletes with that sort of stature will be better over the longer distances because they simply don't have the time to get up to full speed over something like 100 meters. So, and I suppose the trajectory of her career as well, in that she's still developing her raw speed over 60 and 100 meters, but as she matures as an athlete, her endurance improves. You would think that will translate into better 200 meters and 400 meters. And really, everything in her career at the moment is pointing towards somebody who's going to be a world-class 400 meter runner in years to come. I mean, she's only run a handful of 400 meters, but they were bloody impressive 400 meter races.
But she holds the national record. So.
Exactly. Yeah, so it's not bad for an event that you're dipping your toe in. Yeah, and then if you look, I mean, one of the other highlights of the weekend was the women's 400, where you had Sophie Becker and Phil Healy. And we were missing Charlene Mosley from that. And we also had Cliona Manning, who got bronze. So we've got it's a golden era of 400 meter running at the moment. And in terms of those girls competing internationally as individuals, it's fantastic. But there's a real mouthwatering prospect of getting all of them together on a relay team and challenging for medals at major championships over the next couple of years. And, well, that prospect is always great. It's a big challenge for Athletics Ireland as a federation to try and get these girls together and make sure that they're all on the same trajectory and looking at major championships, particularly Worlds and Olympic Games, because there is medal potential there over the next couple of years.
Were you surprised not to see Phil Healy go home as a national champion this year?
I suppose there was very little between the two girls all season. I think they were within a tenth of a second of each other. I think it was 51.6 and 51.7 is what they both run for 400 meters. So certainly wasn't a surprise that Sophie won. It was a cracking race of contrast. Sophie went out really, really hard, and she probably had about 7 or 8 meters of a lead down at the Clonlift Clubhouse at 200 meters. And then gradually, as they came up the home straight, Phil started to pull her back, and again it came right down to the wire. So it's great to see, because that we've got that level of competition, because ultimately they want to go on and they want to be as fast as they can. But having some domestic competition always adds a nice edge to these things, and we certainly got plenty of that at the moment.
Yeah, I know they're two athletes that are pushing each other further and further. And, you know, obviously Phil would have been the recognized name, you know, before the Olympics, but Sophie's certainly making her mark. And she's been in really good form this season, I suppose. You know, we've gotten used to hearing Phil's name over 100, 200 and 400. So it's interesting to see, obviously, that she's specifically focusing on the 400 at the moment, and on whether we'll see her in action maybe again over the 100 and 200. It's all heating up anyways in the sprint distances.
Yeah. The other one that was interesting actually was I don't know if you noticed, Phil's sister Joan actually got
That's what I was just going to say. I was like, not to forget that Joan went home with a medal as well, so there was a silver and a bronze in that house.
Yeah, it was a busy Monday putting all the new medals on the mantelpiece in the Healy household after the weekend.
In terms of the hurdles as well, so Sarah Lavin, she obviously claimed the 100-meter hurdles title, the 7th national record for her, and then Kelly McGrory in the 400 hurdles. So, how do you think we're doing as a nation in hurdles at the moment?
Yeah, so Sarah has had a breakthrough season where her indoors were absolutely phenomenal. To make a world indoor final over 60-meter hurdles is a really classy performance, and she's beginning to come into the territory where Derval O'Rourke was a couple of years back, whereas her 60-meter times are beginning to challenge Derval's records at this stage, which is great to see. And I think over the next couple of years, what you'd like to see, and I'm sure what she'd like to see, is that she begins to challenge that 100-meter record of Derval's, which is, I mean, it's incredibly fast. So she's got a little bit of ground to make up there at the moment. I guess with the hurdles at the weekend in the Nationals, the thing that was probably the biggest factor in it was the headwind again. And it's even more of an issue for hurdlers in that they've got a certain stride pattern in between each hurdle, and when you're into a strong headwind, as they were on Saturday and Sunday, it really messes up that stride pattern. So I think for the likes of Sarah, they were quite happy to just get through the weekend, you know, get the title on the board, and come away without any major problems as such, and just move on to some hopefully faster and calmer conditions in the weeks ahead for their championships.
Talk to us a bit about the middle distance, because there were a few names maybe that we were missing. I know Ciara McGeehan had COVID. Sarah Healy chose to race in the 800, not the 1500. So as a middle distance expert, give us the lowdown on the 800 and the 15.
Yeah, so Sarah dropped down to the 800 from her traditional distance of the 15, and mainly because she's actually racing the 1500 meters in Stockholm on Thursday night. So she wanted a little bit of a sharpener there, and she wanted to test it herself against some of the 800 meter girls. So I think in advance, probably people were billing that 800 meters as a real head-to-head with herself and Louise Shannon. I mean, Louise has had an absolute storming season. She ran 1:59, break the national record in Belfast a couple of weeks ago. But when it came down to it, Louise was adamant she was going to win in her own event on Sunday. She was very classy in the home straight, pulled away very impressively to win that 100 meter in the last 100 meters. And she's going to go on to the Europeans and Worlds over the next couple of weeks, and it'll be exciting to see if she can move that dial on a little bit, because Irish 800 meter running for women over the last few years has just moved to a different level. Where a few years ago 203, 204 was the sort of time that would have won you a national title. 203, 204 would barely get you into a national final. Now the standard has gone so high. So it's great. And Georgie Hartigan was another person who was missing from that 800 meters at the weekend, and Nadia Power, who's been injured. She's not going to race this season. So again, we're talking about so many people that weren't there, which is great that there's not just the girls that are on the scene, but there's lots of depth behind it. The women's 1500, I suppose it was more of a domestic field. We didn't have Ciara because she picked up COVID. So you were left with a race where it was a lot of the very good domestic girls had a real chance that, you know, an opportunity that doesn't come along too often, where the likes of the Ciaras or the Sarah Healys had not been taking part that year. It opens up the opportunity of winning a national title, and it came down to a great scrap down the home straight between Niamh Markham, Maisie O'Sullivan, and Carla Sweeney, who ended up winning out at the end. And Carla was really strong down that last 100 meters. So great to see that, a real typical 1500 meters, 2 laps just crawling around, looking at each other, nobody willing to take it on. And then gradually over the last 600, it began to wind up. And it was a great finish down the home straight there as well, and a great win for Carla.
Yeah, I know it was, you know, we've been watching middle distance over the last couple of years, and there certainly is loads of talent. I think it's it's great to see that we have the depth in sprinting, and we also have depth in middle distance at the moment as well. In terms of the 5K, Fionnuala McCormack out to impress as ever. I think it was she passed the line having just done 600 meters, and she'd already put a distance between herself and the group. And I think what like kind of stood out there was like nobody was willing to kind of go with her, or like to try and go with her. It's like she's almost so intimidating that everyone's like, yeah, it's fine, we'll just do our own race and let Fionnuala do whatever she's doing. So yeah, look, she took that by the scruff of the neck, and it's not surprising. And then the rest of the group stuck together for a while, then started to spread out, and then we had two sisters join her on the podium. So we'd Ida and Saoirse Nagona. What stood out to me was that the three podium finishers are all 37 years old, and two of them have young children. Yeah, it was it certainly caught the eye. I suppose when you look at Fionnuala, first of all, I mean, she's a once in a generation athlete from an Irish point of view, and that she's been so strong over such a long period of time. And there was an element on Saturday that when she went, that people probably gave her a little bit too much respect. And I think the girls who were second and third would probably say maybe afterwards that they might have liked to have covered that move a little bit more aggressively at the time. I think it was 12 seconds was the time difference between Fionnuala and second. Yeah. So I mean, once the gap opened, it didn't grow too significantly in the second half of the race. So I think from that point of view, they may regret not covering it initially, but like Fionnuala was very, very strong. She was out, and again, not to keep talking about the wind, but it was very windy again on Saturday afternoon, and she was into that on her own for most of the race. Whereas the two girls, the three of them are not particularly big people either, so the wind is going to have a good go at you. But I suppose, the fact that you've got three girls there who were 37 years of age, it certainly was unusual. And I suppose the conversation afterwards was, and has been on occasion, is particularly when Fionnuala is at the fore, is like, okay, she's coming to the end of her career. Where are the athletes coming through behind? But I think sometimes our eye is drawn to a result like Saturday. But when you look back over the last couple of years, it probably hasn't been the case. We've actually got a good crop of middle distance girls coming through. And in particular, I suppose if you look back towards cross country, which is a good benchmark of it's a good reflection of the overall health of middle distance running in the country. Fionnuala didn't run that because she was doing a marathon, and then she came back and finished first Irish finisher at Eurocross the week afterwards. But at the actual national championships themselves, you had Michelle Finn, you had Sarah Healy, with the Flanagan sisters, you had Aoife Cook. They were the girls that were in contention, and they're certainly, all in their mid-20s, early 30s. I suppose is what you might consider a standard age for most middle distance runners at this stage. So I don't think that there's a massive chasm there, that there's a massive gap in terms of the talent coming through. I think it probably just was a set of circumstances, because a lot of those girls that I just mentioned that were competitive at national cross country and have been very competitive for us over the last couple of years, just for one reason or another weren't there on Saturday. And the three girls that did come through, they took advantage of that, and it was good to see. Actually, afterwards, I'd met Fionnuala just around the top end, and she's chasing the kids around the top end, trying to not worried so much about her warm down as she was about actually getting the kids home that evening. Yeah, they're kind of that size where you need to keep an eye on them. They could be gone wandering. Very much so, yeah. But it's something that I suppose when you look at international athletics over the years, we're not unaccustomed to seeing women in their late 30s who've had kids in their say early 30s coming back to the sport after a period of time being away and being very competitive. And I suppose two names that spring to mind would be Paula Radcliffe in particular, had some of her best performances later in her career after she had her kids. And there was also, if people might remember, back in 2008, there was a 38-year-old Constantina Dita from Romania who came back at 38 years of age and won the Olympic marathon. That was a bit of a head turner at the time. But in terms of, I suppose, after having kids, there is some evidence to suggest that there's a slight hormonal benefit after having kids, and that sometimes on a cardiovascular base as well, that the heart chambers change a little bit, and that the ability to pump blood around the body and ultimately pump oxygen around the body is somewhat increased after having kids. So that there's a very slight performance benefit to that. Increased estrogen levels is also another one. So there is a trend that once women come back to the sport later in life, if everything else allows,
that there's no reason that they can't be competitive at a very high level for well into their 30s and even sometimes into their 40s.
Yeah, no, I did think it was interesting that we had a set of twins, one with children and one without, and I was like, well, there's the perfect science experiment.
Yeah, exactly.
Because obviously, like, I've heard a bit about you know, the scope for you know, women as they're kind of getting a bit older and that have had children, and in longer distance events they can still remain to be, you know, very competitive and doing very well. And you know, is Sinead Diver in her early 40s? If I'm
she is, yeah. Sinead is in her early 40s, and the girl that I coach, Anne-Marie McGlynn, who is 41, so she had some of the best performances of her career after she turned 40, and her kids are I think probably in their early teens at this stage. So again,
I did think having a set of twins, I was like, if there's a time to do it, I was like, we need to analyze their results from you know, before Ida had her children and after, and see what the differences have been. But she only had her second child there 8 months ago, so she said for her it's just like getting out of the house, it's running, and it's like enjoying it. She was like, you know, obviously to land on the podium is you know, is something great, you know, great for her as well. But she's like, honestly, it's just like getting out of the house and you know, taking a bit of time to herself, and the fact that she's getting results as well is great. But yeah, no, look, I was chatting with Rob Heffernan after, and he was saying you know, about the depth on the men's side in the 5K at the moment, and I think looking at the fact that the three on the podium were 37, but you make a valid point that some of the athletes that we'd be used to probably seeing in the likes of a 5K actually just weren't running. And then, to be fair, Michelle Finn was doing 3,000 meter steeplechase as well.
Yeah, I think I wouldn't be as concerned about the overall health of Irish middle distance running, because a lot of the girls who like I said, have been very competitive for us over the last couple of years, particularly the Flanagans, Eva Richardson, Michelle, obviously Sarah Healy, they've really stepped on over the last couple of years. And yeah, I suppose circumstances didn't permit them to race at the weekend, but you'd like to see them back over the next couple of months, and again being competitive for us at European Cross later on this year.
And in terms of you know, women that are in their 30s or heading towards late 30s, is there more opportunity in middle to long distance than there is in sprinting? Like, I know Alison Felix obviously has a couple of children, Shelley-Ann Fraser-Price is the same, and they're still in top form.
Yeah, I guess sprinters being competitive into their 30s is more unusual than distance runners, and that's not just a female thing, that's you know, for men as well. The general peak for most sprinters is in their mid-20s. Whereas the general peak performance for most middle distance athletes, male and female, tends to be in their early to mid 30s. So particularly, I suppose, if you take the example of somebody who takes a year out to have kids and maybe around their late 20s, early 30s, you get those years back later on. There's that couple of years where you're not training at a high level, and you often find with athletes who are competitive into their late 30s and maybe up to 40 years of age, is there some period of their career due to injury or pregnancy or whatever it might have been, that they've missed 2 or 3 years, and that's allowed them, I suppose, allow their body to recover from those years of hard training, and provides a little bit of freshness. And when they come back to the sport, that it allows them to continue, and there's a little bit more longevity to their careers then.
Yeah, no, it's certainly interesting. I mean, I thought it was very cool to see, you know, that age demographic on the podium. And obviously, like, Fionnuala has always stood out to me as an athlete that is just, you know, next level. But the two girls that were chasing there, I hadn't actually seen them before, and when they were on the track, I couldn't tell how old they were at all. And then I was chatting to their mom after. I was like, do you mind me asking how old they are? And I just thought it was really interesting that, you know, all three on the podium for the national championships are 37 years old. So yeah, look, it's really interesting, and from our audience perspective, it shows the scope to stay involved in sport, the reasons why you'd stay involved in sport, that having kids doesn't mean that you have to stop being involved in sport at any level as well. So certainly a refreshing side on that type of things. And we'll have to let Rob know not to be concerned that there's lots of people coming up. He seemed a bit worried the other day.
Yeah, I think when you look over, like, because our female teams over the last couple of years have performed so well at European cross country, and like, if you look down the road to the European Championships in a couple of weeks' time, we've got a really strong women's marathon team going there. So Fionnuala, Anne-Marie McGlynn, who I just mentioned, and Aoife Cook from Cork. And they've got a really strong chance of taking a medal in the team event at the marathon and the European Championships. Now, I suppose maybe what might actually feed back to Rob's point and yours is that Anne-Marie's 41, Fionnuala is 37. Aoife is obviously a little bit younger than that, but the average age would be maybe a little bit more concerning that they're not going to be back for another championship down the line. But it is, like you said there, it's inspirational for people to see athletes at that age come back and being competitive on the international stage and being in positions to win medals. It gives people so much encouragement that it can be done. It's certainly complicated. It's not straightforward when you've got family and everything else to deal with, but when the circumstances are right, it's great to see.
Yeah, no, look, in terms of Fionnuala, like obviously she's still getting faster and faster, like her marathon times are quick and she's getting some really good results. So I was talking to her after European cross country and she's like, yeah, I'm not going anywhere anytime soon. So we'll have her still competing over the next few years anyway. But that was brilliant, Emma. Thanks so much for taking the time to chat to us about the national championships, and congratulations again.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Congratulations on another national title. How does it feel?
Thank you so much. Great. It's such a privilege and an honour, and I don't think I'd ever take any one for granted. Today was definitely trickier conditions than normal, and I'm just actually genuinely really relieved to kind of get through it and be injury free and all that, because you can be that little bit more extended when you're into a headwind, and I think it came up with initially minus 7.3, which is bizarre.
And what is the goal for the season for you now?
I think my main focus will be the Europeans in Munich at the end of August, so I'm still a bit off from that. And I really obviously want to get to Oregon. I want to be really competitive in Oregon. I think in Tokyo last year I left really, really disappointed with my performance. So put out a better, more competitive performance there on the world stage. Obviously, back in my mind I'm always thinking Paris, and I just want to make sure everything I'm doing is getting me closer to what I want to do in Paris. So yeah, I think ultimately European final would be magic, and once you're in a final, particularly in hurdles, then we can happen. So yeah.
And you're running very fast this year and last year, always seeming to get faster and faster. So talk to us about a couple of records that might be on the cards.
Oh, I don't know. Ultimately, that is the dream, yeah, I think I've been living in terrible shadow for a long time. But I mean, 12:65, she's a sprint world finalist. We have very few world finalists in any event ever from Ireland, and to have someone of that calibre in an event, it's a privilege, and it's a privilege to be compared to her. But bloody hard. She set the bar really, really high. So yeah, ultimately I think I'm 0.28 off in outdoors, 0.13 indoors. That was the time she won when she won the World Championship. So yeah, that's, you can't help it. That's the bar, isn't it?
What's it like to have her as a role model, and obviously still involved in the community as well?
Yeah, it's massive, and not everyone is as fortunate in their event, I guess, to have someone who is so competitive internationally and all the rest. So yeah, it's brilliant, and I think across all sports, I mean, it's amazing what you guys are doing, and there's just so many more role models growing up for kids now, and I hope, I think it'll reap rewards in years to come on how many people we have competing on the highest level.
Next up, we caught up with Irish goalkeeper Ayeisha McFerran ahead of the Hockey World Cup.
To be honest, I have a lot of mixed emotions about the Olympics. It's one of those ones where, looking back, I regret probably not enjoying it as much as I did. For me, I was very focused on, I wanted to go, I wanted to perform, I wanted to do my job, but then I kind of lost the, oh my gosh, we've made history. We went to the Olympics, first female team to do that. So it's a bit mixed for me. Still, I'm so proud to be part of the team that went and represent Ireland, and be part of the first female team to go. So I do have some regrets, but like it's also weird because you hear all these stories of how amazing the Olympics is, how you can go meet all these athletes, but then obviously with COVID, you couldn't really do any of that. Yeah, so for me, I would probably say my best time at the Olympics was actually after. It sounds terrible, but it was after we get knocked out, because the pressure was off me to perform, and that's whenever we were down at the green in the village, and we were meeting so many athletes. Like I was hanging out with the Kenyan sevens. There was a lot of the volleyball people were there. Like some of the, who was it? It was the girl who just won the triple jump for Venezuela. She was down, and we were like, oh my gosh, you just literally won gold in the Olympics, and now you're down here hanging out in the grass, and I see you, you're about 10 meters from me. So like a lot of things like that stuff you miss during the actual games itself. But then yeah, after it, I had the best time, because that's, for me, that was what the Olympics was about. Was it should be about connecting with other sports, meeting other cultures, other people just getting to know different things. But for me, I find I missed that during the actual games itself.
And you're in Pool A, which is the Netherlands, yourselves, Germany and Chile. So what was your thought when you first seen that?
A bit mixed, to be honest. I know my initial thought was, of course, we would get the Dutch in Holland, because sure, like, what otherwise are to do it. But it kind of gets them out of the way. You don't face them in a crossover until later on. So like, you're like, okay, that's fine. You know, we'll manage them now, scout them out a bit, and then go from there. Us playing against Germany, it's always a battle. We're one of those teams that we always play up to them. They like to have the ball for 10, 20 passes, and then they'll try and do something. And I think that for us allows us to be really, really patient and build that our defense, which is what we're good at. We're strong there, and then we go and we counter. We're quick. We're a really, really quick team. Like, some of the girls now are, it's insane how quick they are, and they're still able to do their skills with it. So I think that'll be a really good challenge for us. And then we have Chile in the middle of both of them, and then that is our target game. And that's a game that we know that we must get a result, do a job, and tick a box and say we've done it. The Chile have definitely got better in the past couple of years, so I think that in itself will prove a challenge. They're obviously coming into their first tournament, and we obviously know the feeling that they're going to be going through. They're going to be probably targeting us as well, but it's going to be one hell of a match. And I know our girls are definitely up for the fight, so we'll see what happens on the day.
In terms of the Gaelic football, so we now have the quarterfinals booked. Give us your expert opinion on the games that happened last weekend. So we had Tipperary beat Cavan, Armagh beat Monaghan, Cork beat Waterford, and Dublin beat Mayo. So were they the results you expected from the weekend?
Yeah, I think pretty much it went to script, Niamh, maybe not necessarily in terms of the performances. I'm thinking of Cork and Waterford. Like, Waterford have played Cork 3 times this year now in the National League and in the Munster Championship. They were always going to give Cork a hard game, and they were ahead at half time. But under Shane Ronayne, this is a developing team. This is a team, new manager, but are finding their feet. I saw them against in the flesh against Donegal. I've seen all their other games, so it's I can see the progression. They're getting better. Darren O'Sullivan, lights out again. 1-7 is somebody that's rarely mentioned as one of the best footballers in the country, but she is. And another good performance as well from the Cork full forward line, Orla Finn, Libby Coppinger, and at half hour weighing in with a goal. So they had it tough against Waterford, but they got the job done. And again, probably Cork's most potent weapon heading into the quarterfinals, where they'll face Mayo, is their half back line. Melissa Duggan, Laura Manny, and Maura Callan in centre back. They've got a settled back line now. They've got Roisin Phelan back in there. I think they're improving with every game. They need to put a full 60-minute performance together. Cork haven't done that yet this season, and they admit that themselves, and they'll need to do that against Mayo, because even though Mayo lost to the Dubs and a really good Dublin performance, 2-14 to 1-7, I think Mayo have the weapons that can give Cork a lot of trouble when it comes to the quarterfinals. But if Cork play to their potential, I'd expect them to win that game.
Yes, in terms of the quarterfinals for the audience, we have Dublin versus Donegal. That'll be in Carrick-on-Shannon. We have Meath versus Galway, which will be taking place in Tullamore. We have Kerry versus Armagh, also in Tullamore, and we have Cork versus Mayo in Cusack Park in Ennis. So some exciting games ahead. Do you stand by your predictions from before?
He said, trying to remember. I do, because I think the semi-final lineup will be Meath versus Dublin. I think Dublin are just coming to the ball nicely. I think Mick Bowen has done a good job with holding back some of his more established players and making sure that they're hitting their optimum when it comes to the business end of the championship, which is now. Meath are interesting in that a lot of people don't seem to talk about them, even though they're national
champions.
The champions, yeah. And I suppose it's because they're new champions and we've gotten so used to Cork and Dublin. But I think it's going to be Meath and Dublin in the All-Ireland semi-finals, unless we have a big shock in one of those quarterfinals. But I don't see it coming, just because Meath and Dublin are hitting their stride. On the other side of the draw, Cork need to be at their best to beat Mayo, but I would expect them to do that. But that last one between Kerry,
no bias.
Between Kerry, I know, typical. The last one between Armagh and Kerry. I mean, these are two of the coming teams. These are teams now packed with talent. The Mackens, Amy Mackin, Mallins, and all these players in the Armagh team. They won the Ulster Championship. They knocked off Donegal to do that. So there's no more, surprise packages with them. They have the tools to do it. And the way they put away Monaghan 2-12 to 4 points in last weekend, hugely impressive. But Kerry, I've seen Kerry come up against Cork, and Kerry played really well in the Munster final against Cork. This is a very dangerous team with a full strength team. Now they didn't play their full strength team against Westmeath last weekend, and they still won 217 to 9 points. Louise Mira-Hurtig is another player who should be mentioned as one of the best in the country. Rarely gets that accolade for whatever reasons, but she's going to be there. And I under Declan Quill and Dara Small, this is a Kerry team that needs to take out a name. I've said that before, that they're a very good team, but I think if they can beat Armagh and if they go into a semi-final against Cork, they'll have absolutely no fear of Cork in an All-Ireland semi-final. And that's a dangerous banana skin for Cork at that scenario. But I can't call it, Niamh. I think Armagh have really impressed me this year. Now, I know they're losing Blaine Mackin to the AFLW, and I think Orlally as well later on whenever they exit the championship. But if Armagh beat Kerry, and I think that's going to be the game of the weekend, I think that's really the match, because I just can't call it.
Yeah.
What a game against Cork in the semi-final, irrespective of who gets through, provided Cork beat Mayo, of course. But I was hoping for better from Mayo, Niamh. I suppose that's where I'm coming from against Dublin. It's easy to say against Dublin, they're a machine. But I just like, again with Mayo, and it's like Galway as well. Like I keep waiting for that big performance. But it's hard to call. And the great thing about Senior Ladies Football Championship this year is that it's hard to call. It's not of the previous 8 years where it was either Dublin or Cork. They're legitimate champions. They will want to defend it to tell the detractors who are not giving them the credit they deserve that we're here and we've established ourselves. They will also lose their best players in Vicky Wall and a few others to AFLW when the season ends. But for now, head on the chopping block, Dublin v Meath and Cork v Armagh. And Kerry aren't going to like me for that, but I think Armagh, the way Armagh played against Donegal.
Armagh, there's some superstars in there, and you're obviously talking about Amy and Blaughin Mackin. I know our friend Joanna Reardon is a big fan of the Mackins as well. She's always tweeting about the Mackins. But look, there are some stars in there. So look, if they can get the job done, and it's getting those points over the bar and getting the scores done. You're right. It is a real possibility. So it'll be some exciting football. It'll be in 2 weeks' time. I know that we do have a relegation match before that. So that'll be a relegation playoff with Cavan v Westmeath. That'll actually be this Sunday, July 3rd. So what is your expectation there?
I've seen Westmeath a couple of times over the last couple of years, and they're a very, very good team. It surprises me that they're in a relegation battle as it is. For Cavan, it was heartbreaking against Tipperary because it was a last minute. I think it was a penalty it was. Tipperary beat them with a last minute penalty the last day, 2-6 to 1-8. Not a bad team either. But that just tells you that the standards are improving now each year in senior football. It's not just the top 3 or 4 who you might pick a winner from. Just below those top 3 or 4, there's a huge improvement in tactics and improvement in skill levels, definitely this year, from going through the highlights of all of those games as much as I can cover them. It's very hard to call. I would think that because Westmeath have experience of this and relegation playoffs over the last while, I think that should give them the edge. But Cavan put up a really good performance against Tipperary and were very unlucky to lose, as I said, and they'll feel aggrieved at that. So at least they can take that into it as well. But if you're asking me, if Cavan and Westmeath are in relegation playoff, that tells me that the level of talent just below the potential winners every year of the Senior All-Ireland Championship is getting better. And I think that's a good thing, but very hard to call. But I'll give the edge to Westmeath because I've actually seen them over the last couple of years, and I think they have experience of this, and I think a bit more experience as well on the pitch when it will come to it.
Thanks for that, Ger. It's great to catch up. We will run through what is going on in sport this weekend. So we will have the Morton Games on the 2nd of July. It is the first time that the 100-metre hurdles will be in the Morton Games, and our very own Sarah Lavin will be up against Olympic semi-finalist Liz Clay of Australia. Louise Shanahan, Sophie Becker and Rashida Adelecki will also all be competing in this Morton Games. We also have the Hockey World Cup kicking off. Ireland kick off against number 1 side, the Netherlands. The 2 2018 finalists will go head to head, and it certainly is not an easy game for the Irish or for the hosts in the Netherlands. There'll be lots of expectation and pressure on the hosts, so Ireland are looking forward to that game, and they'll be playing again in front of a sold out crowd in the 9,500 people venue. So very exciting for Ireland to come up against them, but they'll be really focused on the game against Chile on Tuesday, where they have said they absolutely must get a win in this competition. Then on to Camogie, the final round of the Senior All-Ireland Championship group stages will be on. This will decide who will go into the semi-finals and who will fight it out into the quarter-finals. Big games of the weekend include Powerhouse clash as Galway take on Kilkenny. The winners will advance to the semi-finals in Croke Park, but the losers will still be involved playing a quarter-final in Semple Stadium 7 days earlier. It's all to play for in Group 1. Cork are through already, but Waterford, Dublin and Tipperary have a real shot. Waterford will come up against Clare, Dublin will face Wexford and Tipperary will face Cork. The aforementioned teams need victory for a chance to progress to the quarter-finals. In terms of the Women's National League, we'll have the return after an international break. League leaders Shelbourne will take on Treaty United, Wexford Youths will play Galway and UCD Waves will play Peamount United. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Her Sports Show. A reminder that you can catch up with this episode and every episode on our YouTube channels, on social media channels and all podcast platforms. Keep involved in the conversation and we look forward to catching up with you next week.
The Her Sports Show, live every Wednesday on YouTube and every podcast app.